Marcus Chun had always believed that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their weapons or technology, but in their stubborn refusal to give up when everything seemed hopeless. Standing on the bridge of the diplomatic vessel Prometheus, watching the massive Zephyrian fleet through the view screen, he wondered if that strength would be enough today. The war had been raging for 3 years. What started as a territorial dispute over mining rights in the Kepler sector had escalated into something far worse. The Zephyrian Empire, with their superior technology and seemingly endless resources, had pushed human forces back to their core worlds. Earth itself was under siege, its orbital defenses holding by the thinnest of margins. Marcus wasn't a soldier. He was a xenobiologist turned reluctant diplomat, chosen for this mission because he understood alien psychology better than most. The brass thought maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to end this war without humanity being wiped from the galaxy. The Zephyrian flagship stellar Dominion loomed ahead, a crystalline behemoth that seemed to bend light around its hull. Their technology was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Marcus had studied their species for years, fascinated by their unique biology. Zephyrians were energy beings who had learned to inhabit crystalline forms, allowing them to interface directly with their technology. They lived for thousands of years and saw most other species as brief, inconsequential sparks. Incoming transmission from the Zephyrian flagship reported communications officer Patel, her voice tight with nervousness. They're requesting you board their vessel immediately. Marcus straightened his diplomatic uniform and checked his translation device one last time. The small neural implant would allow him to communicate in perfect Zephyrian, though he wondered if perfect communication would be enough to bridge the gap between their species. "Tell them I'm on my way," he said, heading toward the shuttle bay. "And Patel, if this goes badly, make sure Earth knows we tried everything." The shuttle trip to the Zephyrian flagship felt like the longest 20 minutes of Marcus's life. The pilot, a young ensign named Torres, kept glancing nervously at the alien vessel growing larger in their view screen. "Sir," Torres whispered, "what if this is a trap? What if they just want to capture our top diplomat?" Marcus had considered the same possibility, but humanity was out of options. Their fleets were scattered, their worlds under constant bombardment, and their allies had either fallen or abandoned them. This meeting was their last chance at survival. "Then, we'll face whatever comes," Marcus replied, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "But remember, Ensign, humans have surprised aliens before. We might just do it again." The docking bay of the Zephyrian ship was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. The walls seemed to pulse with inner light, and the air hummed with energy that made his skin tingle. Zephyrian guards, their crystalline bodies reflecting the ambient glow, escorted him through corridors that felt more like being inside a living organism than a spacecraft. The throne room was vast, its ceiling disappearing into shadows above. At its center sat a figure that took Marcus's breath away. Princess Lyralii of the Zephyrian Empire was beautiful in a way that defied human understanding. Her crystalline form was translucent blue-white, with veins of silver energy coursing through her body like liquid starlight. She was tall, elegant, and when she moved, it was with the fluid grace of water flowing uphill. But it was her eyes that captured Marcus completely. They were like twin galaxies, swirling with colors that had no names in any human language. When she looked at him, he felt as though she could see directly into his soul. "So," she said, her voice like music played on crystal chimes, "this is humanity's champion, the one they send to beg for mercy." Marcus straightened, drawing on reserves of courage he didn't know he possessed. "I come not to beg, Your Highness, but to seek understanding. This war serves neither of our peoples." Princess Lyralii laughed, a sound like silver bells in a winter wind. "Understanding? Your species has existed for barely a few thousand years. We have watched civilizations rise and fall for eons. What could you possibly understand about the greater galaxy?" "Perhaps nothing about the galaxy," Marcus admitted, "but I understand loss. I understand hope. I understand that even the mightiest empire can be wrong about the value of what seems small and insignificant. The princess leaned forward on her throne, studying him with those impossible eyes. Interesting. Most species either grovel or threaten when facing extinction. You do neither, because neither would serve any purpose, Marcus replied. Groveling won't change your mind about humanity's worth, and threats ring hollow when spoken by the losing side. But perhaps honest conversation might reveal something neither of us expected. For long moments, silence filled the throne room. The Zephyrian guards stood motionless, their energy forms flickering slightly as they maintained their positions. Princess Lyralii continued to study Marcus with an intensity that made him feel transparent. Finally, she spoke. You intrigue me, human. In 3 years of war, no member of your species has spoken to me as an equal rather than a subject or enemy. Tell me, Marcus Chun of Earth, what makes humanity worthy of continued existence? Marcus took a deep breath. This was the moment everything hinged on. The future of his entire species might depend on his next words. We're not worthy of existence, Your Highness, he said quietly. No species is worthy or unworthy. Existence isn't something to be earned or granted by others. It simply is. But if you're asking what makes us valuable, then I would say it's our capacity to surprise ourselves. The princess tilted her head, curious. Explain. Other species might call it foolishness, but we call it hope. When facing impossible odds, humans have a tendency to find impossible solutions. We've survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and our own technological adolescence. Each time, everyone expected us to fail. Each time, we found a way forward that no one, including ourselves, had imagined. And you believe you can surprise us as well. Marcus met her gaze steadily. I believe we can surprise everyone, including ourselves. The question is whether you're curious enough to see what that surprise might be. Princess Lyralii stood from her throne, her crystalline form catching and refracting the ambient light into rainbow patterns on the walls. She descended the steps slowly, each footfall ringing like a struck bell. When she reached Marcus, she was close enough that he could see his reflection in her translucent features. You speak of surprises and hope, she said softly, but what of fear? Do you not fear death, Marcus Chen? Do you not fear for your species? Terror, Marcus admitted without hesitation. I'm absolutely terrified. But fear and hope aren't opposites. They're dance partners. Fear shows us what we might lose. Hope shows us what we might gain. Together, they give us the courage to reach for something better than what is. The princess studied him for another long moment, then did something that shocked everyone in the room, including herself. She smiled. It was a small expression, barely a curve of crystalline lips, but it transformed her entire face. Perhaps, she said quietly, there's more to humanity than our analysts believed. Very well, Marcus Chun. You have earned something no other species has in 1,000 years. You have earned my curiosity. We will speak again tomorrow. As the guards escorted Marcus back to his shuttle, he couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had just changed. He had expected to plead for humanity's survival. Instead, he had engaged in something far more dangerous and promising. He had begun a conversation. Marcus returned to the Zephyrian flagship the next day with a mixture of anticipation and dread. The night had brought no sleep, only endless analysis of every word exchanged with Princess Lyralii. His crew aboard the Prometheus had bombarded him with questions he couldn't answer. Was this progress? Was the princess genuinely interested in dialogue, or was she simply toying with him before delivering humanity's death sentence? This time, instead of the imposing throne room, he was escorted to what the guards called the princess's private chambers. The space was smaller, but no less magnificent. Walls of living crystal pulsed with soft light, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with barely contained energy. At the center of the room stood Princess Lyralii, but she appeared different somehow. Less formal, more relaxed, though still radiating the otherworldly beauty that had captivated him yesterday. "You returned," she observed, gesturing for him to take a seat on what appeared to be a chair grown from the same crystalline material as the walls. "I confess, I was not entirely certain you would." "Where else would I be?" Marcus replied, settling carefully onto the surprisingly comfortable chair. "My species' survival might depend on these conversations." "Indeed," the princess said, taking her own seat across from him. "But first, I am curious about something else. Yesterday, when you spoke of humanity's capacity to surprise, you seemed to include yourself in that assessment. Yet here you are, exactly as I expected you would be. Where is your surprise, Marcus-chun?" It was a fair question, and one Marcus had been asking himself. Perhaps the surprise isn't in what I do, but in what these conversations lead to. I came here expecting to negotiate terms of surrender. Instead, I find myself engaged in something that feels more like. Like what? Like getting to know someone, Marcus admitted, feeling heat rise in his cheeks. It was a dangerous admission, one that could be seen as either diplomatic brilliance or catastrophic naivety. Princess Lyralii was quiet for a long moment, her galaxy eyes studying him with an intensity that made him feel completely transparent. "Getting to know someone," she repeated slowly. "When was the last time someone sought to know me, rather than simply gain advantage through me?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications Marcus wasn't sure he was ready to explore. "When was the last time you wanted them to?" he asked gently. The princess's crystalline features shifted in what might have been surprise. That is not a question I have considered in many centuries." "Then, perhaps that's part of the problem," Marcus suggested. "Not just between our species, but within your own existence. You've lived for so long that you've forgotten what it feels like to be genuinely curious about another being. And you believe humanity could remind me. I believe any species that still surprises itself might surprise you as well. But more than that, I believe you're already remembering. Otherwise, why would you have arranged this private meeting instead of simply pronouncing judgment in front of your court?" Princess Lyralii stood and moved to a wall that suddenly became transparent, revealing the vast expanse of space beyond. Earth was visible in the distance, a small blue marble surrounded by the debris of orbital battles. "For 2,000 years, I have been the Zephyrian Empire's primary strategic mind," she said without turning around. "I have overseen the subjugation or elimination of 47 species. Each time, the decision was logical, based on careful analysis of resources, threats, and potential. Each time, I felt nothing beyond mild satisfaction at a problem efficiently solved." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. 47 species, entire civilizations, wiped away by the beings standing before him. Yet something in her voice suggested this conversation was headed somewhere unexpected. "And now," he asked, "now I find myself questioning those decisions for the first time." She turned back to face him, and Marcus was startled to see something that looked almost like vulnerability in her alien features. "Not because they were wrong, necessarily, but because I realized I never truly understood what was being lost." "What changed?" "You did." The admission seemed to surprise her as much as it did Marcus. "Yesterday, when you spoke of fear and hope as dance partners, I felt something I had not experienced in centuries. I felt curious, not about strategy or resources or political advantage, but about you, about what it would be like to see existence through eyes that have known only a few decades instead of millennia." Marcus's heart was racing. The conversation had taken a turn he hadn't anticipated, moving in a territory that was both thrilling and terrifying. "And what have you concluded?" "That perhaps longevity is not always a gift. When you have seen empires rise and fall like waves on a shore, individual lives begin to seem insignificant. But you, with your brief existence, speak as though every moment carries weight, as though each choice matters." "Because it does," Marcus said simply. "When you only have a few decades, every year, every day, every conversation becomes precious. We don't have the luxury of assuming there will always be more time. Princess Lyralii returned to her seat, but this time she leaned forward closer to Marcus than formal protocol would typically allow. Tell me about your life, Marcus Chun. Not your diplomatic credentials or your strategic value, but your actual existence. What drives you? What brings you joy? What do you fear losing most? The request was so unexpected, so personal, that Marcus found himself momentarily speechless. In all his preparation for these negotiations, he had never imagined being asked such intimate questions. I'm just a scientist, he began slowly. I study alien life forms because I'm fascinated by the countless ways consciousness can emerge. Every species I've encountered has found different solutions to the same fundamental challenges of existence. And what solution has humanity found? We haven't found one solution. We've found billions. Every human being creates their own unique approach to existence. Some focus on creation, others on discovery. Some find meaning in connections with others, some in personal achievement. Some dedicate themselves to beauty, others to justice. We're not unified in our methods, but we're unified in our refusal to accept that there's only one right way to live. The princess was quiet for a long time, absorbing his words. In Zephyrian society, there is order, purpose. Each individual fills their designated role in the greater harmony of the empire. It is efficient. It is peaceful. It is lonely, Marcus suggested gently. Her galaxy eyes widened slightly. I was going to say perfect, but perhaps you are not wrong. Loneliness isn't always about being alone, Marcus said. Sometimes it's about being surrounded by people who see only your function, not your essence. You're a princess, a strategic mind, a weapon of the empire. But what are you when all those roles are stripped away? I do not know. The admission seemed to cost her considerable effort. I have been these roles for so long that I cannot remember what existed before them. Marcus felt a surge of something that was part diplomatic instinct and part genuine compassion. Then, maybe that's what humanity could offer the Zephyrian Empire. Not resources or territory or strategic advantage, but perspective. The reminder that existence has value beyond function. You would teach us to be human. I would suggest that consciousness, in all its forms, has inherent worth that transcends utility. Zephyrians and humans might find different expressions of that consciousness, but both deserve the chance to explore what they might become. Princess Lyralii stood again, but this time she moved closer to Marcus, close enough that he could see the complex patterns of energy flowing through her crystalline form. You speak of what humanity might offer the Zephyrian Empire, but what would you offer me, personally, Marcus Shun? The question hit him like a physical force. There was something in her voice, in the way she looked at him, that suggested this was no longer about diplomacy or species survival. This was about two beings alien to each other in every conceivable way, discovering an unexpected connection. Friendship, Marcus said finally, the chance to be seen as more than your roles. The opportunity to discover what Lyralii might be when she's not Princess Lyralii of the Zephyrian Empire. And what might Marcus Chun be when he's not humanity's last desperate diplomat? Marcus smiled, feeling some of the tension leave his shoulders. I guess we'd have to find out together. The princess extended her hand toward him, a gesture so human that Marcus wondered if she had learned it from studying his species. When their fingers touched, her crystalline skin was surprisingly warm, humming with barely contained energy. Perhaps, she said softly, we could begin that discovery tomorrow. The third day brought an unexpected development. Instead of meeting in the princess's chambers, Marcus was escorted to what his guides called the Memory Gardens. He had read about this place in his research, but never imagined he would be allowed to see it. The Memory Gardens were said to be where Zephyrians stored their most precious experiences, crystallized moments that could be shared and relived. The space defied description in any human language. Vast chambers filled with floating crystal formations, each one pulsing with captured memories. Some were as small as flowers, containing brief moments of joy or discovery. Others were massive structures that housed entire lifetimes of experience. The air itself seemed alive with whispered echoes of the past. Princess Lyralii was waiting for him at the center of the gardens, surrounded by a constellation of small memory crystals that orbited around her like planets around a star. She wore no formal regalia today, appearing more like an ordinary Zephyrian than the imperial princess he had first met. "Welcome to our most sacred space," she said as Marcus approached. "No alien has ever been permitted here before." Marcus felt the weight of the honor and the risk. "Why am I here, Lyralii?" The use of her name without title felt natural now, after their conversations of the previous days. "Because I want to show you something that may help you understand why this war began, and why ending it is more complicated than either of us initially believed." She gestured to the memory crystals around them. "These are my personal memories, gathered over 2 millennia of existence." One of the larger crystals drifted closer to Marcus, its surface showing swirling patterns of light that seemed to suggest shapes and movement. "May I touch it?" he asked. "If you wish to experience the memory it contains, yes. But be warned, human senses were not designed to process Zephyrian memories. The experience may be overwhelming." Marcus reached out carefully and placed his palm against the crystal's surface. Immediately, the world around him dissolved. He was suddenly seeing through Lyralii's eyes, but centuries in the past. A younger version of her stood on the bridge of a Zephyrian warship, watching as another fleet approached. But these weren't human ships. They were elegant, organic-looking vessels that seemed to be grown rather than built. The ethereals, Lyralii's voice seemed to come from inside the memory. They were the last species we encountered before humanity. Beautiful, graceful, and completely dedicated to artistic expression. Their entire civilization was built around the creation of beauty. In the memory, Marcus watched as the ethereal fleet took formation. There was no aggression in their movements, only elegant precision that looked more like a dance than a military maneuver. They were trying to communicate through their positioning, creating patterns of extraordinary beauty even in the face of war. "We gave them the same choice we gave humanity," Lyralii continued. "Submit to the Empire or face destruction." They chose to create one final artwork instead. The memory showed the ethereal ships beginning to glow, their hulls becoming translucent as energy flowed through them like blood through veins. They were transforming themselves into something magnificent and terrible, turning their entire fleet into a single, massive sculpture of light and motion. "It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen," Lyralii said softly. "And I ordered their destruction anyway, because beauty was not strategically useful to the Empire." Marcus felt the memory version of Lyralii give the order, felt her complete certainty that she was making the correct decision. The ethereal fleet vanished in brilliant flashes of light, their final artwork lasting only moments before it was erased forever. The memory faded, leaving Marcus back in the present, shaken by what he had experienced. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I need you to understand that this war isn't just about territorial disputes or resources. It's about a pattern that has repeated for centuries. Each time we encounter a new species, we evaluate them based on their potential contribution to the Empire's power and efficiency. Each time, we find them wanting. Each time, we destroy them." Marcus felt a chill of understanding. "And you're questioning that pattern for the first time. Because of you, yes. You made me realize that perhaps we've been asking the wrong questions. Instead of asking what each species can contribute to our empire, perhaps we should be asking what the galaxy loses when they disappear." Lyralii moved to another memory crystal, this one smaller and more recent. "This is from our first conversation. Would you like to experience it from my perspective?" Marcus nodded, reaching for the crystal. This time, the transition was gentler, but the experience was no less profound. He felt Lyralii's initial dismissiveness transform into curiosity as they spoke. More than that, he felt her loneliness, The crushing weight of millennia spent making decisions that affected entire civilizations while having no one who truly understood the burden. When the memory ended, Marcus found Lyralii watching him intently. "What did you experience?" she asked. "Isolation," Marcus said quietly. "Absolute isolation despite being surrounded by an entire empire. You've been making life and death decisions for entire species while having no one to share the weight of those choices." "No one could understand," Lyralii said. "My advisors see only strategic possibilities. My subjects see only their princess and military leader. For centuries, I have been alone with the knowledge of what our expansion truly costs." Marcus stepped closer to her, moved by the pain he had felt in her memory. "You don't have to be alone with it anymore." "Don't I? You are human, Marcus-chan. Even if we end this war, even if humanity survives, you will live perhaps a century while I continue for millennia. How can any connection between us be more than a brief moment in my existence?" It was a question Marcus had been avoiding, but now it demanded an answer. The connection he felt to Lyralii was unlike anything he had experienced, but she was right about the fundamental differences between them. How could anything meaningful develop between beings with such different lifespans and natures? "Maybe that's exactly why it matters," Marcus said finally. "You've lived for centuries, but when did you last feel truly surprised by another being? When did you last discover something about yourself that you didn't know existed?" Lyralii was quiet for a long moment, her galaxy eyes reflecting the light of the memory crystals around them. "2 days ago," she admitted, "when I first spoke with you. Then perhaps the brevity isn't a flaw, but a feature. Perhaps the knowledge that our time is limited makes every moment more precious, not less. You're suggesting that the temporary nature of our connection is what gives it meaning. I'm suggesting that meaning doesn't require permanence. A single perfect moment can be worth more than centuries of routine existence." Lyralii moved closer to him, close enough that he could feel the energy radiating from her crystalline form. "Marcus-chan, I find myself facing a choice I never anticipated. I can end this war, spare your species, and never see you again. Or I can propose something that has never been done in the history of the Zephyrian Empire. A true alliance, not a subjugation. A partnership between species that could last as long as we both exist." Marcus felt his heart stop. The implications were staggering, not just for the war, but for everything that might follow. What would such an alliance require? Trust, understanding, and perhaps something more personal to bind our species together. Lyralii's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Marcus-chan, I find myself wanting to ask you a question that may shock us both. I'm listening. In 3 days of conversation, you have shown me aspects of existence I had forgotten were possible. You have reminded me what it feels like to be curious about another being, to be surprised by connection, to value something beyond strategic utility." She paused, seeming to gather courage. "Do you desire me as your wife, human?" The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. Marriage between their species seemed impossible on every level: biological, cultural, practical. Yet as he looked into her galaxy eyes, he realized that the impossibility wasn't what mattered. What mattered was the courage to reach for something beyond what either of them had imagined possible. "More than life itself," he answered, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. The memory crystals around them suddenly flared with brilliant light, as if responding to the emotional intensity of the moment. Lyralii stepped back, her crystalline features showing something that might have been wonder. "Then we face a new challenge," she said softly. "How to build a future that neither of our species has ever imagined." Marcus reached for her hand, no longer caring about the impossibility of their situation. The same way humans have always faced impossible challenges. One day at a time, with hope and stubbornness and the absolute refusal to accept that something can't be done just because it's never been done before. "You would truly bind yourself to me, despite the differences between us?" despite the fact that I have been responsible for the deaths of millions. I would bind myself to the being who had the courage to question those deaths, to the person who chose curiosity over certainty, to Lyralii, not the princess, but the individual who wants to discover what she might become. For the first time since he had met her, Lyralii smiled without reservation. It transformed her alien features into something radiant and beautiful beyond description. Then, let us discover together what the galaxy might become when two impossible beings decide to love each other. Anyway, the announcement sent shockwaves through both the Zephyrian Empire and what remained of human space. Princess Lyralii, heir to the most powerful empire in the galaxy, was to marry Marcus Chun, a human diplomat. The marriage would formalize an unprecedented alliance between species, ending the 3-year war and establishing new protocols for interspecies cooperation. The reactions were immediate and intense. Within hours of the announcement, Marcus found himself facing a hollow conference with Earth's Emergency Council, their faces displaying various combinations of disbelief, relief, and concern. Marcus, Admiral Harrison began carefully. We need to understand exactly what you've agreed to. Marriage to an alien princess? The implications are staggering. The implications are that humanity survives. Marcus replied calmly. Lyralii isn't just offering marriage. She's offering true partnership. No subjugation, no second-class status. Equal standing in an alliance that could reshape how species interact throughout the galaxy. President Shin leaned forward on the screen. But marriage, Marcus? Is this diplomacy or something more personal? Marcus met her gaze steadily. It's both. The personal connection made the political alliance possible. Without understanding each other as individuals, we could never have built trust between our species. And you truly believe you love this alien being? The question was blunt, but Marcus had been asking himself the same thing since making his declaration. I believe I love who she is when she's free to be herself rather than just a weapon of empire. I love her curiosity, her courage to question certainties she's held for centuries, her willingness to choose connection over isolation. Dr. Reeves, the xenobiologist, spoke up from the council. Marcus, the biological implications alone are overwhelming. How would such a union even function? Humans and Zephyrians are as different as matter and energy. We'll figure out, Marcus said simply. Humans have always been good at adapting to impossible situations. On the Zephyrian side, the reactions were even more dramatic. Marcus watched from Lyralii's chambers as she faced her own council, their crystalline forms flickering with agitation that was visible even to his human eyes. Princess, this is beyond unprecedented, declared General Thaxon, his deep voice resonating through the chamber. Marriage to an alien? The very concept violates 1,000 years of imperial protocol. Then, perhaps it's time for new protocols, Lyralii replied calmly. The old ones have led us to endless cycles of conquest and destruction. This alliance offers something different. High Counselor Vera, an ancient Zephyrian whose energy patterns indicated extreme age, stepped forward. You would bind yourself to a creature that will live perhaps 100 years while you endure for millennia. What happens when he dies and you remain? It was the question that had haunted Marcus as well, but Lyralii's answer surprised him with its thoughtfulness. Then, I will carry his memory, his perspective, and his influence forward through those millennia. Instead of existing alone with the weight of imperial decisions, I will have experienced what it means to value each moment, each choice, each connection. That lesson will live beyond his physical existence. And if the alliance fails, if humanity proves unworthy of partnership, pressed General Thaxon, then we will deal with that when it happens, rather than destroying them preemptively because of what they might become. We have made that mistake too many times before. Marcus watched Lyralii defend their decision with a passion that made his heart race. She wasn't just protecting their personal relationship. She was advocating for an entirely new philosophy of how powerful species should interact with weaker ones. After the council sessions ended, Marcus and Lyralii found themselves alone in their chambers, both somewhat drained by the intensity of the reactions their announcement had provoked. "Are you having second thoughts?" Lyralii asked, settling beside him on the crystalline seating area that had somehow adapted to accommodate human physiology. "About marrying you?" "Never," Marcus replied immediately. "About whether we can actually make this work." "Every few minutes." Lyralii laughed, the sound like crystal chimes in a gentle breeze. "At least you're honest about your doubts. I find myself oscillating between absolute certainty and complete terror." "What terrifies you most?" "That I might destroy you," she said quietly. "Not intentionally, but simply by being what I am. My energy patterns, my lifespan, my responsibilities to the Empire, any of these could overwhelm what you're capable of handling as a human." Marcus took her hand, still marveling at the warm energy that flowed through her crystalline form. "And what gives you certainty?" "The fact that in 3 days of conversation, you've changed me more than 2,000 years of existence ever did. If you can do that in 3 days, imagine what we might accomplish together over decades." "Speaking of accomplishments, what exactly would this alliance look like? Beyond the marriage, I mean. How do we actually build partnership between species that are so fundamentally different?" Lyralii stood and moved to the transparent wall that showed the view of space beyond. Earth was still visible in the distance, no longer under siege, but still scarred by years of war. "I've been considering that question since we made our decision," she said. "The Zephyrian Empire has conquered through superior technology and strategic thinking. But perhaps that very superiority has blinded us to what we lack, which is innovation born from necessity, creativity born from limitation, adaptation born from survival pressure." She turned back to face him. "Humans excel at these things precisely because you've had to. You've faced challenges that would have destroyed most species, but you've found unexpected solutions." Marcus began to see the shape of what she was proposing. "You want humans integrated into Zephyrian operations, not as subjects but as partners. Our different perspectives could complement your advanced capabilities. More than that, I want to establish joint colonies, mixed crews on exploration vessels, collaborative research stations. I want our species to learn from each other rather than one simply dominating the other. The logistics alone would be staggering. Our environmental needs, our communication methods, our social structures, they're all different. Which is exactly why it would work," Lyralii said with growing excitement. "Each challenge we solve together makes both species stronger. Each successful collaboration proves that difference is a source of strength rather than division." Marcus felt a surge of enthusiasm as he began to understand the scope of her vision. "We wouldn't just be ending a war. We'd be creating a model for how any species could coexist." "Precisely. And our marriage would be the symbol of that possibility. Not a political arrangement, but a genuine connection between beings who chose to see past their differences to find what they shared." "Which brings us back to the practical question," Marcus said gently. "How exactly does marriage work between a human and a Zephyrian?" Lyralii moved closer to him, her galaxy eyes reflecting the ambient light of her chambers. "I've been researching that question as well. While we cannot be physically intimate in ways your species might expect, there are other forms of connection available to us, such as energy resonance. Zephyrians can share our energy patterns with compatible beings. It would allow us to experience something analogous to what humans call emotional intimacy. And memory sharing, like what we did in the memory gardens? Yes, but deeper. True memory bonding, where we can share not just experiences, but the emotions and insights attached to them. Over time, we could build a shared consciousness that transcends our individual limitations." Marcus felt a thrill at the possibilities she described, but also a touch of apprehension. "Would I still be human after such bonding?" "You would be human plus more," Lyralii said softly. "Just as I would still be Zephyrian, but enhanced by your perspective and experiences." We would become something neither of us could be alone. A new kind of being altogether. Perhaps the first of our kind, but not the last. If we succeed, we could offer this possibility to others. Humans and Zephyrians who choose to bond across species lines. Marcus stood and moved to stand beside her at the viewing wall. Earth hung in space before them, a small blue world that had somehow produced beings capable of reaching across impossible differences to find connection. "When do we begin?" he asked. "The ceremony is planned for 7 days from now. Both of our councils need time to prepare the formal alliance documents, and our peoples need time to process what this means. And in the meantime," Lyralii turned to face him fully, her expression showing vulnerability that he was beginning to recognize as uniquely hers. "In the meantime, we learn whether two impossible beings can actually love each other enough to build something beautiful from their differences." Marcus reached for both her hands, feeling the energy flow between them like a promise of what they might become together. "I think we've already started proving that's possible." Outside the viewport, stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, witnesses to the birth of something the galaxy had never seen before, a love that bridged not just the space between worlds, but the space between entirely different ways of being alive. The wedding ceremony took place in the void between the human and Zephyrian fleets on a specially constructed platform that existed in the neutral space between worlds. Representatives from both species gathered in environmental suits or energy fields as appropriate, creating the most unusual wedding party in galactic history. Marcus stood at the altar wearing a modified diplomatic uniform embedded with Zephyrian energy crystals, allowing him to survive in the space environment while maintaining the symbolic connection to both cultures. Beside him, Lyralii had taken a form more radiant than he had ever seen, her crystalline body shot through with patterns of silver and gold that seemed to represent joy itself. Admiral Harrison served as Marcus's best man, her weathered face showing a mixture of pride and bewilderment at the circumstances. On Lyralii's side stood High Counselor Vera, who had surprised everyone by volunteering to perform the Zephyrian portion of the ceremony despite her earlier objections. The service itself was unlike anything either species had ever witnessed. Human vows of commitment and love were interspersed with Zephyrian energy harmonics that created visible patterns of light in the vacuum around them. When Marcus spoke his vows, his words were translated not just in his Zephyrian language, but into resonance patterns that Lyralii's people could feel as well as hear. "I take you, Lyralii, not just as my wife, but as my partner in proving that connection transcends difference," Marcus said, his voice carrying across both fleets through quantum communication arrays. "I promise to bring human curiosity to our bond, to never stop discovering who you are, and to help you remember that existence has value beyond function." Lyralii's response came in harmonics that made the surrounding space shimmer with aurora-like colors. "I take you, Marcus Chun, as proof that love is the universe's answer to isolation. I promise to bring Zephyrian perspective to our bond, to show you wonders beyond human imagination, and to learn from you that brevity makes beauty more precious, not less." The exchange of energy that followed was visible to everyone present. Lyralii extended her consciousness toward Marcus, and he felt her essence merge with his own. For a moment that lasted eternity, they were truly one being, experiencing existence from both human and Zephyrian perspectives simultaneously. Marcus felt himself expand beyond the boundaries of his physical form, consciousness flowing into patterns of energy and light that defied human understanding. At the same time, he felt Lyralii experience the intensity and urgency of human emotion, the way mortality made every sensation sharp and immediate. When they separated back into individual beings, both were changed. Marcus could still feel echoes of Lyralii's energy patterns within his own mind, while her crystalline form now showed traces of warmth and immediacy that hadn't been there before. By the authority of both the Human Federation and the Zephyrian Empire, announced High Counselor Vera, I declare you bound not just to each other, but to the future you will build together. The cheers that followed came in frequencies across the entire spectrum, from human voices to Zephyrian energy harmonics that painted the vacuum around them in celebration. 6 months later, Marcus stood on the observation deck of the Joint Research Station New Horizon, watching as human and Zephyrian crews worked together to construct what would become the first truly integrated interspecies facility. The site still amazed him daily. The station itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering. Human adaptability and Zephyrian technology had combined to create something neither species could have built alone. Modular sections allowed for different environmental needs, while quantum communication networks enabled real-time collaboration despite the different speeds at which the species processed information. Still surprised by what we've accomplished? Lyralii asked, materializing beside him in the energy-based form she used when moving through the station. Every single day, Marcus admitted, 6 months ago, our species were trying to destroy each other. Now we're building research stations together and planning joint exploration missions to the galactic core. The High Council approved the Andromeda expedition proposal yesterday. Lyralii reported with excitement that was now tinged with recognizably human enthusiasm. The first interspecies crew will launch next year. Marcus shook his head in wonder. From war to joint exploration of another galaxy. Sometimes I can barely believe we've come so far so quickly. Humans aren't the only species capable of surprises, Lyralii said with affection. Zephyrians, it turns out, are quite adaptable when given proper motivation. They stood together watching the construction crews, human figures in environmental suits working alongside energy beings who could shape matter with thought alone. The site represented everything their bond had made possible. Marcus, Lyralii said quietly, I've been thinking about what High Counselor Vera asked during the negotiations. What happens when you age and die while I continue for millennia? It was a question they had both been avoiding, but Marcus had been considering it more frequently as their bond deepened. I've been thinking about that too, he admitted, and I think I have an answer. Oh, you remember what you told your council about carrying my memory and perspective forward through the centuries? Of course. What if it could be more than memory? Marcus turned to face her energy form directly. What if our bonding process could be used to preserve something essential about human consciousness within Zephyrian energy patterns? Lyralii's form flickered with sudden understanding. You're suggesting that when your physical body fails, your consciousness could be preserved within mine. Not just preserved, but active, contributing, still able to grow and change and discover. It would be a new form of existence, neither fully human nor Zephyrian, but something unprecedented. The research teams have been making progress on consciousness transfer, Lyralii said thoughtfully. If we could adapt their techniques to work with interspecies bonding, then death wouldn't be the end of our partnership, just a transformation of it. And more than that, it could offer the same possibility to other bonded pairs. Eventually, we might be able to preserve the essence of entire species within Zephyrian consciousness networks. Lyralii moved closer, her energy form taking on a more solid appearance as she focused her attention. You would truly want such an existence? To give up physical form entirely? To continue growing and discovering with you? To help preserve human perspective within the galaxy, even after our species might face extinction? Yes, without hesitation. Then, we have a new project to add to our research agenda, Lyralii said with the kind of joy that now characterized most of their conversations. Though I suspect this one will be our most ambitious yet. Solving death seems like a reasonably human challenge. Marcus agreed with a grin. Impossible, ridiculous, and absolutely worth trying. They were interrupted by a communication alert. The station's AI announced, Princess Lyralii, Marcus Chun, you have an incoming priority message from the Galactic Council. They exchanged glances before accepting the transmission. A holographic figure appeared before them. Ambassador Kelton of the Syrian Republic, a species that had remained neutral during the Human-Zephyrian War. Princess Lorelei, Mr. Chun, the ambassador began formally. I bring greetings from the Galactic Council and a proposal that may interest you both. We're listening, Lorelei replied. Your successful alliance has not gone unnoticed by the other species of the galaxy. The Council has been observing the progress of your joint ventures with considerable interest. Marcus felt a flutter of apprehension. What kind of interest? The productive kind, I assure you. Several species have approached the Council requesting assistance in establishing similar cooperative relationships. The Andromedan Collective and the Crystalline Dominion have specifically asked if you might be willing to serve as mediators for first contact protocols. Lorelei and Marcus looked at each other, and Marcus could feel her excitement through their bond. You're asking us to help other species learn to cooperate rather than compete, Marcus said. Precisely. Your marriage and alliance have become symbols throughout the galaxy of what's possible when beings choose connection over conquest. The Council believes you could help prevent future conflicts by establishing new models for interspecies relations. We would be honored to accept, Lorelei said immediately. Excellent. The first mediation request comes from a rather challenging situation. Two species in the Vega system have been engaged in a territorial dispute for 50 years. Both sides have agreed to attempt mediation only because of your success with seemingly impossible reconciliation. After the ambassador signed off, Marcus and Lorelei stood together in comfortable silence, absorbing the implications of what they had just accepted. From ending one war to preventing dozens of others, Marcus mused. I guess we really have started something significant. The beginning of a new age, Lorelei agreed, where difference is celebrated rather than feared, where cooperation is the default rather than the exception. Marcus took her hand, still marveling at the warm energy that flowed between them. Think we can actually pull it off? Transform how the entire galaxy thinks about interspecies relations. Lorelei smiled, her crystalline features showing the warmth she had learned from their bond. We're humans and Zephyrians who fell in love across impossible differences and ended a war that everyone thought was unwinnable. I think we can handle a few more impossible challenges. Outside the viewport, ships from dozens of species moved through space in peaceful cooperation, following trade routes and exploration missions that had been impossible just months before. The site represented not just the end of one conflict, but the beginning of entirely new possibilities for the galaxy. Besides, Marcus added with the kind of confidence that had served humanity well throughout their history. Impossible just means no one has figured out how to do it yet. Together, they turned back toward the interior of the station, ready to begin preparing for challenges they couldn't yet imagine, secure in the knowledge that whatever came next, they would face it as they had learned to face everything else. Together with curiosity and hope and the absolute refusal to accept that something couldn't be done simply because it never had been. The galaxy stretched out before them, vast and full of wonders they had yet to discover, populated by species they had yet to meet, and alliances they had yet to forge. And somewhere in that infinite expanse of possibility, the next impossible challenge was waiting for the touch of human stubbornness and Zephyrian wisdom working in perfect harmony. The future, like their love, was going to be an adventure unlike anything anyone had dared to imagine. Marcus Chun had always believed that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their weapons or technology, but in their stubborn refusal to give up when everything seemed hopeless. Standing on the bridge of the diplomatic vessel Prometheus, watching the massive Zephyrian fleet through the viewscreen, he wondered if that strength would be enough today. The war had been raging for 3 years. What started as a territorial dispute over mining rights in the Kepler sector had escalated into something far worse. The Zephyrian Empire, with their superior technology and seemingly endless resources, had pushed human forces back to their core worlds. Earth itself was under siege, its orbital defenses holding by the thinnest of margins. Marcus wasn't a soldier. He was a xenobiologist turned reluctant diplomat, chosen for this mission because he understood alien psychology better than most. The brass thought maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to end this war without humanity being wiped from the galaxy. The Zephyrian flagship Stellar Dominion loomed ahead, a crystalline behemoth that seemed to bend light around its hull. Their technology was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Marcus had studied their species for years, fascinated by their unique biology. Zephyrians were energy beings who had learned to inhabit crystalline forms, allowing them to interface directly with their technology. They lived for thousands of years and saw most other species as brief, inconsequential sparks. Incoming transmission from the Zephyrian flagship reported communications officer Patel, her voice tight with nervousness. "They're requesting you board their vessel immediately." Marcus straightened his diplomatic uniform and checked his translation device one last time. The small neural implant would allow him to communicate in perfect Zephyrian, though he wondered if perfect communication would be enough to bridge the gap between their species. "Tell them I'm on my way," he said, heading toward the shuttle bay. "And Patel, if this goes badly, make sure Earth knows we tried everything." The shuttle trip to the Zephyrian flagship felt like the longest 20 minutes of Marcus's life. The pilot, a young ensign named Torres, kept glancing nervously at the alien vessel growing larger in their view screen. "Sir," Torres whispered, "what if this is a trap? What if they just want to capture our top diplomat?" Marcus had considered the same possibility. But humanity was out of options. Their fleets were scattered, their worlds under constant bombardment, and their allies had either fallen or abandoned them. This meeting was their last chance at survival. "Then, we'll face whatever comes," Marcus replied, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "But remember, Ensign, humans have surprised aliens before. We might just do it again." The docking bay of the Zephyrian ship was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. The walls seemed to pulse with inner light, and the air hummed with energy that made his skin tingle. Zephyrian guards, their crystalline bodies reflecting the ambient glow, escorted him through corridors that felt more like being inside a living organism than a spacecraft. The throne room was vast, its ceiling disappearing into shadows above. At its center sat a figure that took Marcus's breath away. Princess Lyralii of the Zephyrian Empire was beautiful in a way that defied human understanding. Her crystalline form was translucent blue-white, with veins of silver energy coursing through her body like liquid starlight. She was tall, elegant, and when she moved, it was with the fluid grace of water flowing uphill. But it was her eyes that captured Marcus completely. They were like twin galaxies, swirling with colors that had no names in any human language. When she looked at him, he felt as though she could see directly into his soul. "So," she said, her voice like music played on crystal chimes, "this is humanity's champion, the one they send to beg for mercy." Marcus straightened, drawing on reserves of courage he didn't know he possessed. "I come not to beg, Your Highness, but to seek understanding. This war serves neither of our peoples." Princess Lyralii laughed, a sound like silver bells in a winter wind. "Understanding? Your species has existed for barely a few thousand years. We have watched civilizations rise and fall for eons. What could you possibly understand about the greater galaxy?" "Perhaps nothing about the galaxy," Marcus admitted, "but I understand loss. I understand hope. I understand that even the mightiest empire can be wrong about the value of what seems small and insignificant." The princess leaned forward on her throne, studying him with those impossible eyes. "Interesting. Most species either grovel or threaten when facing extinction. You do neither, because neither would serve any purpose," Marcus replied. "Groveling won't change your mind about humanity's worth, and threats ring hollow when spoken by the losing side. But perhaps honest conversation might reveal something neither of us expected." For long moments, silence filled the throne room. The Zephyrian guards stood motionless, their energy forms flickering slightly as they maintained their positions. Princess Lyralii continued to study Marcus with an intensity that made him feel transparent. Finally, she spoke. "You intrigue me, human. In 3 years of war, no member of your species has spoken to me as an equal rather than a subject or enemy. Tell me, Marcus Chun of Earth, what makes humanity worthy of continued existence?" Marcus took a deep breath. This was the moment everything hinged on. The future of his entire species might depend on his next words. "We're not worthy of existence, Your Highness," he said quietly. "No species is worthy or unworthy. Existence isn't something to be earned or granted by others. It simply is. But if you're asking what makes us valuable, then I would say it's our capacity to surprise ourselves." The princess tilted her head, curious. "Explain." "Other species might call it foolishness, but we call it hope. When facing impossible odds, humans have a tendency to find impossible solutions. We've survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and our own technological adolescence. Each time, everyone expected us to fail. Each time, we found a way forward that no one, including ourselves, had imagined. And you believe you can surprise us as well." Marcus met her gaze steadily. "I believe we can surprise everyone, including ourselves. The question is whether you're curious enough to see what that surprise might be." Princess Lyralii stood from her throne, her crystalline form catching and refracting the ambient light into rainbow patterns on the walls. She descended the steps slowly, each footfall ringing like a struck bell. When she reached Marcus, she was close enough that he could see his reflection in her translucent features. "You speak of surprises and hope," she said softly, "but what of fear? Do you not fear death, Marcus Chin? Do you not fear for your species?" "Terror," Marcus admitted without hesitation. "I am absolutely terrified. But fear and hope aren't opposites. They're dance partners. Fear shows us what we might lose. Hope shows us what we might gain. Together, they give us the courage to reach for something better than what is." The princess studied him for another long moment, then did something that shocked everyone in the room, including herself. She smiled. It was a small expression, barely a curve of crystalline lips, but it transformed her entire face. "Perhaps," she said quietly, "there is more to humanity than our analysts believed." "Very well, Marcus Chun. You have earned something no other species has in 1,000 years. You have earned my curiosity. We will speak again tomorrow." As the guards escorted Marcus back to his shuttle, he couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had just changed. He had expected to plead for humanity's survival. Instead, he had engaged in something far more dangerous and promising. He had begun a conversation.